Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're playing some good old classic Puppet PortalCraft. So the only real few new additions to Puppet PortalCraft since it was a massive meta deck in the past in rotation, which of course has changed now since we have seen sets rotate and new cards come in. The biggest couple of changes I would say is more people including things like Liam, Master of Puppets, and the Pull the Strings, which is actually quite a nice removal card. Other than that, everything is usually pretty stock standard for puppets. Marionette Lad is played a lot more than it probably used to be though. That's probably the only other big addition to these sort of decks. Although these decks aren't super popular or super good, it was nice to see a little bit of new life into the puppets. So I thought, why not give it a fair go and get right into it. So kicking us off, we have a Portal versus Portal. Most unlimited Portal decks focus around artifacts and using obviously things like the Machina finishes and pure just artifact spam. Of course those decks are better than this one as far as PortalCraft goes, but this one was interesting enough that I thought it might be a little bit of fun to cover and give my kind of opinion on it, and taking a look back on an old style of deck when we're looking at, of course, puppet decks. And of course our opponent having a turn 1 play doesn't help us too much, especially when we don't have one. Really we're relying on the turn 2 plus model for this deck because there is no turn 1 play in the deck. So really all we can do is try and force the pressure using puppets as much as possible to go for lethal. Of course when you're trying to push big lethals you're using things like Noah and of course August to really get the lethal out. It's just a matter of, can we reach those positions before losing? And sometimes that can be quite a tight game. So our opponent's going for pretty much straight up just artifact spam here. You can tell that they've pumped their deck with some artifacts, now they've drawn a heap of them. That's really what they must have been aiming for. We're going to pretty simply clear this board out and set up for next turn, where we do have the potential to use our Marionette Lad and our Disciple to clear out some space. Ideally though, a Puppet Strings would be better, something of that sort. Some mass removal would be good. That's not the worst card, but we're definitely going to focus on the Marionette Lad play. We should be able to remove at least 2 things here pretty comfortably. Another okay card that you could possibly run might be Troop Master, although I think he would clunk the deck up too much, and that's why I haven't got him in this variation. Since I think his effect would be okay in the mid to late game, but you'd have to secure your hand before that. And he really would be a terrible early game play if you haven't already got an insane hand to begin with. Especially since this deck doesn't pack a lot of draw power, other than of course this 1-2. Really, we're mostly focusing on just getting what we need and utilizing as many puppets as possible, and making sure nearly every card that we can possibly top deck is going to give us some kind of edge. So Nicholas does a wonderful job when set up enough. It's also really good when played on turn 8, of course, because it does become an instant ward. And since we do have a second one, making the play now wasn't a bad choice. The only real disadvantage, of course, is going to be our Evo. Since we only have one Evo left, we're definitely going to be dragged out long term, and that's not a position you want to be in when playing this deck. You really want to try and secure your lethals as soon as you can. I have found, though, that because of the way the current meta and things are structured, it can be much more difficult to do so. But we did remove most of this now, which is good. As long as we can keep the pressure on and defend once we get to around turn 10, we should be fine. The biggest turn that's going to be a problem is if they can get the Machina play, but considering what they've played from their hand so far, I have to assume that they just don't have a Machina in hand and they're still trying to draw one. And of course our puppet does a short work of that, plus we can actually pick up another 2 kills with his Automation Knight, killing off the 4-4 and the 2-1 Hamlin very, very comfortably. Very little recourse here. And since we do have 3 Puppet Girl here, we can actually go for one on turn 8 if we need it, and that will give us another 3 puppets to work with. Or we can hold them and then use them as a combo for Noah, so we actually have fairly decent options as far as they go if we don't want to use all our puppets. Although based on their board, I do think removal is definitely the right move. Especially once you consider that having Orcus on the board is definitely a solid one. regardless of if it uses its, of course, choose effect. So Ancient Artifact, not the best thing for us to go up against there. At least they still had to use some of their Storm. We're very low on health, which puts us at pretty severe risk, and these draws could be dangerous. We definitely am not going to have fun dealing with those. Also, ideally, I probably shouldn't have done it this way, but I couldn't think of a better way to go about it right now. I just had to take the risk if I wanted to have a chance at lethal. Otherwise, I would have banished one of the cheaper cost ones and then probably killed off the bigger drop, but I really could not come up with another way to do this that wasn't just going to be risky. So a good sign when you see an artifact dropped, though. That doesn't mean the Maisho is pretty much non-existent at this point. And considering they don't have an Evo, actually, factoring that in, I probably should have paid attention to that. If I had have, I would have realized, you know, once you factor in the no Evo, they can't play the Maisho no matter what. So it's going to be basically useless for them. Plus, we have an exact lethal here on board, and that is going to be the perfect amount to win the game, with very little issue overall. So the next match I have is against Forest. A very common one. Roach Forest is not a fun matchup, no matter what deck I've been using lately, unless of course it is Blood. That tends to be one of the only classes that I can at least hold my own against. But as far as it goes, Roach is just super good, always has been. I'm actually surprised it never saw some form of decent nerf to either some of its support cards or its card directly in all the time that it's existed. Although it did definitely drop off in Unlimited for quite a while, but it's making a quite reasonable return lately, with I would say a very strong following on the Unlimited ladder before the next major expansion. So they got a pretty decent board. Fortunately for them, substitution is too perfect to not use. When I could guarantee the removal, not really a problem. So we can go for the Ardent Sniper now, which is great. I don't really have the best way to use this. I could have probably used the Evo and worked it out better, but honestly, I was pretty fine with this. To be fair, I probably should have just sent that Evo into the big one and left up my 3-1 as a max, but Will of the Forest kind of ruined that plan no matter what, so I'm kind of glad I did go for the face damage as a priority. That definitely seemed to help and make a difference in the long run. Then we have Automation Knight. At least we can start developing our board again, building up some puppets, getting ready for that Noah play on turn 9. Greenland Axeman, not a problem at all. We do need to still get a little bit more damage to face if possible, but I can work with this. So we do have to waste a single puppet, which is fine because Noah would actually give us puppets anyway when we get to that turn. And hopefully Automation Knight, our puppet strings and the puppets that we've got will be able to buy us enough time to reach that big Noah play, which is typically what I prefer to use as lethal, although I do find that August is fine as a lethal option as well. Potentially even earlier, which is always a good thing. For example, if we manage to get her now and we can develop more puppets next turn, of course, we're looking at a very strong board here, see. As you can tell, we perfect draw Orcus in our hand. So we can potentially have that turn 8 lethal when we only need 9 damage. If we have exactly 4 puppets like we do, we can take full advantage of that. And with a little bit extra as far as puppets go as well, we should be even able to clear a low cost ward. So I'm really looking forward to being able to do this. And their whole turn is wasted on Marsh. Not the best play when you're going to be set up for lethal next turn. So Vengeful Puppet, make sure I make that play correctly. And then we slam all of the puppets to the board, setting up for 9 damage. Plus 1, of course, for the ping. Once we factor all that in, it's more than enough. And didn't even need to buy that turn 9 win condition play, so definitely worked out nicely. So while this deck isn't half bad and it's a lot of fun if you miss the old puppet days, Other Portal decks in general are just straight up better. Usually there are, ranging from Omen decks, Machina decks, just pure artifact spam decks. All of those will typically outclass Puppet Portal in the current kind of meta. Although, again, if you're looking for that kind of nostalgia hit, or you just miss playing something, or you never got to play Puppets, this actually isn't a bad one and can do the job reasonably well. Especially if you do want to learn how Puppets functioned, I think it still has that core functionality to it. So if you did enjoy the video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. You'll find the deck list in the description below. Until next time, guys, see ya.